What is collaboration? I mean, I want to give that some thought.
It's a love-hate relationship that goes on with the whole thing.
A kind of total trust.
I think the best part of our collaboration on this project and in our lives is keeping each other at a distance.
Collaboration has to be a dynamic interchange between 2 or 3 or 4 people, and they would have to stimulate things and bring things out of each other that are there but latent, and that would be brought forth by this spark, or whatever you call it.
Kandinsky, Valery Leger, and Marinetti are kicked out of bed.
Modernism is finished, right?
Yeah.
So there's postmodernism.
So that's what I thought when I thought of it, which was to have these works in some form or another actually being ejected out of a bed,
yeah.
not the men.
Oh, that'd be nice.
We had absolutely no idea what the results would be. I mean, this has been a complete surprise. Every work is completely different. There's no uniformity at all.
I think that the problem for poets is that people don't read it very carefully. And this would certainly make them look at the words and pay attention. That's all a poet wants, is somebody to read it. And this would certainly make them look at this part of that poem very hard.
Well, that was the driving, I'm glad you said that. That was the initial, the impetus for this idea to have an exhibition or cause this exhibition to be, that I felt that there is a large art-going public, and I wanted to force, and I don't like to use that word in intellectual, spiritual things, but I wanted to force people to look at poetry, to look at them.
People are always saying, oh, I love to hear poems read because I can hear them. Well, I think a poem should be seen.
But the fascinating thing, I think, about this project has been the relationships that have been created between the poets and the painters as a result of it.
Daybed. When I loved you, then that whole time was like a bed, and that whole year was like a daybed.
You're very peculiar.
We see each other in a luncheonette in town quite frequently for coffee, and it's a love-hate relationship that goes on with the whole thing, like, why isn't it done, and why aren't things happening this way and the other thing?
Oh, we must say
there's a thing that happens with a painting that Sy, as a writer, doesn't have to understand. There are a whole bunch of mechanics of painting that are just laborious. It's like painting a wall or digging a ditch. It's, you know, it's the perseverance to get it finished, you know. There's 10 million edges on this painting.
I think it was ideal that in a way that I did not know the poet, that he was just represented by his poem, and that excited me.
In that sense, it's a collaboration because I get sort of into his mind and sort of in a way ask for permission for certain things. How do you feel about this? So in a way, it's permission.
I produced a manuscript of about 20 poems, and from that we selected the one which we both felt would work best on a column. I think the column was a given.
Each artist does his own work. You know, she's totally engrossed in her work. I'm engrossed in mine. And at the same time, it worked in that she did something to my work, and my work did something for her. And
it was a kind of total trust, which was a very beautiful feeling that I had, that Barbara had entrusted to me, her imagery, and I felt responsible for it.
Well, I thought I might be working rather closely with the artist, which wasn't the case with Bill. I gave him the 11 poems. He chose one. I did not hear from him at all, so that when I saw this at Guildhall in the vault, it was a total surprise to me.
Well, I've known Alfonso's work for a long time. I've been looking at it since I was a teenager, so I sort of knew what to expect. But I find it very exciting because there's so many disparate elements in here, and also in the work, that I like that sort of collection of different things thrown together. It's very inspiring, yeah, because in poetry you want some sort of juxtaposition of ideas or images or objects, and that's what happens in an Ossorio.
The reason I wanted you to do the art for this book is that I only get poetic ideas. I don't get artistic ideas.
He wanted me to do a book with my own little hands.
Elliot wanted a more formidable thing. He suggested two columns with a column across the top. And I thought this would just be a bit much, but he thought it would be more expressive of the sort of thing he wanted. Not only was it a bit much, but it would be much too much work for me to do 2 columns plus the column across the top, you see, with his poem. And you know, enough is enough. He wrote that poem just a few lines.
Oh yeah, it just took a minute.
False bed. There are Easter eggs, red, blue, yellow, and white, pink, in the false bed.
Okay, what's a false bed?
Anything you think it is.
When I studied the poem, the words, the colors, the rhythms of the poem began to suggest forms to me. And I thought about it, I would say, I looked at that canvas and thought about it for a week before I began. And then once I began writing the stanza, and when I had that charcoal in my hand, the painting began to evolve, or the drawing began to evolve by itself. And it was, again, the way I paint.
And I was a little bothered by vertical lines, and also that I had not entirely interpreted his poem. And then I found about 12 o'clock midnight that I made this very fast sketch, and I put it on the easel, and I left a ballot. I slipped a ballot under his door and asked him to vote. Yes, no, or maybe. And the next day I found it on my typewriter, and it said, yes, of course.
It was not dictated by the poet. It grew out of the similarity in ideas, and the poem spoke to me and spoke through the objects. And the result is this hopefully unified thing, beginning with the handwriting of the poet and ending up with more abstract conceptions.
Ordinarily, you would think that I would go to Donald, show me one of your paintings, and I'll write the text, write the poem. But it didn't work this time. This idea was Donald's idea from the very beginning, and I'm very happy he came to that idea.
Well, the poetry had to become part of the painting. The actual letters perhaps were part of the design of the paintings in many of the cases, and it became part of the composition.
I know that a lot of painters will never stand for that, words on their painting. And I had no difficulty. I don't think it would matter where I put the words, frankly. You can always paint the words to fit the painting. I mean, I didn't see any problem in that.
I don't remember who it was who said, let's just use words. So then I was faced with the possibilities and the exciting task of turning these words and letters into shapes and forms and color. This was what was interesting as a challenge to begin with.
The whole idea is lost if I just put fragments of words or fragments of poems, because the idea is evoked from the poem. It's not the other way around. And if I just put parts of it in, I just didn't feel I would be doing justice to the poem.
I've always felt is that it doesn't matter how many words of a poem appear in the poem painting. A word has its meaning, it has its visual idea, and it cannot lose its position, no matter whether it's changed, switched sideways or around over here or around in the front. The word is there, the structure is there, and its literacy is there.
I've never used writing in a painting, but this time I found it was such a satisfactory experience to have a script running through and the kind of rhythm that I think very conceivably I'll do some more of this.
When I try to imagine this work without that element in there, which could be purely linear element, it wouldn't be much of a painting. It would be very incomplete, vague. It wouldn't even be a good dream.
The more I look at it, the more I see something that I should have seen obviously at the very beginning. It's that the letters are acting like a cage, that the painting is kind of beating out against the letters, like the bars. There's that, the letters in the front and that energy behind it of that bird and so on exploding outward against that cage. It's sort of that effect.
I hadn't thought of that, but it's very, very apt, yeah.
It does create another entity that is the combination of the visual and the verbal. And that is what I've tried to do here, beginning with having you write the whole poem in your own handwriting, because in addition to all poems are very personal, but this is a particularly personal elegiac poem.
I like the whole idea of two people working together and producing something that is almost from a third person, sort of unknown. And this was very exciting for me, because I had no idea what Alfonso would do with a 14-line poem, which I'd written a while earlier. And to see what came out, the imagery sort of inspired me, because it illuminated a lot of things having to do with the poem that I hadn't even realized were there before.
Well, it's certainly very surprising to me. That bird in the middle is... I didn't see that bird, you know. When I looked at that painting, I saw it as purely abstract.
What's the matter with you? You didn't see that bird?
I saw this explosion. I saw this explosion in the middle, but I didn't see it as I saw it as an explosion of energy and so on. It only after looking for it a while that I saw that.
To my joy, I think, I saw my own face. Bill King had made a little cute representational carving of my face, grinning and looking down at this other figure. I feel what he has done is to make a kind of rounded version of my poem, which indeed is rounded, which I didn't realize until I saw this.
If you had asked me then, why did I put angels in suddenly, I might have said because they're horizontal, and I had too many vertical images. But also because I frankly didn't know why I was putting angels specifically. I honestly have made this all up after the fact. And otherwise it would be very boring to me. If I knew why I'm putting angels down, you can say I'd forget it.
I didn't really know how to approach this. And I really had to let the poem enter into my almost physical existence when I was working on that. And I realized, as I was working on it later, that I had to, I'm not a mystic, I had to allow it to come in, and it became a very strong presence. Now, I'm not saying this painting was done by unseen hands, but it was done by the poet as much as it was by myself.
The work as it stands now is not just a painting. The poem is very important in it. The particular words are very important, the rhythm of the words. And so it's not just, I think, a straight painting. It would be a poem painting.
He writes something, and I make an image that goes with it. Is there some interest in aiming for something outside of both of that? I mean, do they add up to something other than that? I don't know, because, and then I think to myself, well, then what's so interesting about it? Just because Kenneth writes some line and I make some mark, why? Because you know about me from other things, you've heard of Larry Rivers and you've heard of Kenneth Koch, then there's some intrinsic value in this combination? I don't know.
Mr. Rivers, I'd like to express my admiration for you and your work, and I hope you make a book out of this. This is what I want you to do, in case you forget while you're looking at this tape.
Kenneth, I hope I make a book out of it too.
When it comes to collaboration, I am really such an autocrat that unless things go exactly my way, I tend not to be interested.
It makes you take yourself more seriously when somebody pays this kind of attention. It's not going to change my way of writing, but this kind of attention or involvement by somebody else is very good for poets.
It's making me feel like I'm sick to be in this bed. I mean, I got to get out of this bed. That's not part of the poem.